Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery, watching the planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442b looked peaceful from space with its brown and green surface and thin white clouds. The distress signal had stopped 3 days ago, but Jake knew they had to check anyway. Mining colonies sometimes lost communication equipment during storms. Amy Collins walked up beside him, holding her tablet. She was the ship's xenobiologist and always worried about new planets. Her red hair was tied back, and she looked tired from staying up late reading reports about this system. "Captain, the colony should have 500 people," Amy said, looking at her screen. "They were mining rare metals for Earth Command. The last message said everything was normal." Jake nodded and touched the communication button. "Mike Torres, report to the bridge," he said into the speaker. Mike was their security chief, and Jake wanted him ready, just in case something was wrong. The planet's surface came into view as they entered the atmosphere. The mining colony was built in a valley between two mountains. Large metal buildings and equipment filled the area. Everything looked quiet and still. No people moved around the buildings and no vehicles drove on the roads. Mike Torres arrived, on the bridge wearing his security uniform. He was a big man with dark hair and serious eyes. He had served in the Earth military before joining the Discovery crew. "Something feels wrong," Mike said, looking at the empty colony below. "No lights, no movement, no radio signals. Even if they had problems, someone should be outside." Jake made his decision. "Amy, prepare the landing team. Mike, get your security gear ready. We're going down to check on the colonists." They landed the shuttle near the main colony building. 12 crew members stepped out onto the planet's surface. The air was thin but breathable and smelled like metal and dust. Pete Jackson, Katie Brooks, Steve Parker, and the others spread out in formation while Mike led them toward the buildings. The first thing they noticed was the silence. No machines running, no people talking, no animals making noise, just the wind blowing through empty streets. Amy checked her scanner and frowned at the readings. "I'm picking up life signs," she said quietly. "But they're not human. Something else is here." They reached the main building and found the doors torn off their hinges. Long scratches marked the metal walls like something with very sharp claws had tried to get inside. Dark stains covered the ground that looked like dried blood. Katie Brooks, who worked with the ship's engines, pointed at holes in the building walls. "These weren't made by tools," she said, touching the edges. "Something bit through this metal." They entered the building carefully, with Mike leading the way. The inside was worse than the outside. Furniture was broken and scattered everywhere. Computer screens were smashed and papers covered the floor. More dark stains marked the walls and floor. Steve Parker found the colony's communication center. All the equipment was destroyed and the room smelled terrible. "This wasn't an accident," he said, covering his nose. "Something attacked this place." They moved deeper into the building, following the trail of destruction. Amy kept checking her scanner, and the readings kept getting stronger. Whatever was here was still alive, and there were many of them. In the colony's main hall, they found the first bodies. Amy turned away quickly, but Mike made himself look. The colonists had been torn apart by something with very sharp teeth and claws. The wounds were too big and too deep to be made by any Earth animal. "We need to find survivors," Jake said, even though he was starting to think there might not be any. "Check the secure areas. Look for safe rooms or bunkers." They found the colony's emergency shelter in the basement. The heavy metal door was still sealed, but something had tried very hard to break through. Long scratches covered the surface, and dents showed where something powerful had hit it many times. Mike entered the security code that all Earth colonies used. The door opened slowly, and they heard voices from inside. 3 people stumbled out, looking scared and hungry. Pete Jackson was a mining engineer with dirty clothes and tired eyes. Lisa Ward was the colony's medical officer, and she was holding a small bag of medical supplies. Ryan Clark had been the colony administrator, and he shook with fear. "Thank God you're here," Pete said, grabbing Jake's arm. "We've been hiding for 5 days. They're still out there. The Skarn are still hunting." Amy felt cold when she heard that name. The Skarn were known throughout the galaxy as the perfect predators. They were reptiles that stood 8 feet tall with sharp claws and acid saliva. They hunted in packs and had destroyed 17 different alien species across 4 star systems. "How many are there?" Mike asked, checking his weapon. "We counted. Over 200, Lisa said with a shaking voice. "They came from nowhere 3 weeks ago. They killed most people right away, but they kept some alive. They were using us as hosts for their babies." Ryan pointed toward the back of the building. "They made a breeding chamber in the old storage area. They put people in there and the larvae grow inside them until they're ready to hatch." Jake felt sick thinking about it, but he had to focus on getting everyone to safety. "We need to get back to the shuttle right now," he said. "Our ship can protect us and call for help." But as they moved toward the exit, Amy's scanner started beeping faster. The life signs were moving and getting closer. Something was coming toward the building, and there were many of them. Mike looked out the window and saw shapes moving in the shadows between buildings. The Skarn had found them, and they were surrounding the colony. Their yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, and their long tails swished back and forth as they moved. "Too late," Mike said, raising his weapon. "They know we're here." The Skarn moved, like liquid darkness flowing around the buildings. They were bigger than any Earth predator with thick scales that looked like armor. Their claws were as long as knives, and their teeth were designed for tearing meat from bone. Jake counted at least 50 of them moving into position around the building. More were coming from the colony's outer areas. The humans were trapped, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The Skarn had been the galaxy's apex predators for thousands of years. They had never met a species that could fight back effectively. Every other race either ran away or died quickly when the Skarn decided to hunt them. But they had never hunted humans before. The first Skarn warrior crashed through the window like a living nightmare. It stood 8 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. Its claws were longer than human fingers, and its mouth was full of sharp teeth designed for killing. Mike Torres fired his weapon at the creature's chest. The energy blast hit the scales and made them glow, but did not stop the Skarn. It roared and jumped toward Mike with its claws extended, ready to tear him apart. But Mike had fought dangerous enemies before on Earth. He rolled sideways, and the Skarn's claws hit the wall where his head had been a second earlier. Mike came up shooting and this time aimed for the creature's neck where the scales looked thinner. The Skarn screamed and fell backward with green blood flowing from its wound. Mike had found a weak spot that other species had never discovered because they died too quickly to learn from their mistakes. "Aim for the neck and joints," Mike shouted to the others. "The scales are weaker there." More Skarn broke through the windows and doors. Jake Morrison pulled out his sidearm and started shooting while helping Pete Jackson and the other survivors move toward the back of the building. Amy Collins was scanning the creatures with her equipment, trying to learn everything she could about their biology. Katie Brooks grabbed a heavy metal pipe from the broken furniture and swung it at a Skarn's leg. The creature stumbled, and she hit it again in the same spot until she heard bones crack. The Skarn fell down, and Katie kept hitting it until it stopped moving. "They're not invincible," Katie yelled over the noise of fighting. "They can be hurt just like any other animal." The Skarn were confused by the human response. Every other species they had hunted either ran away in terror or froze with fear when attacked. But these humans were fighting back with weapons, tools, and teamwork. They were learning weak spots and sharing information while the battle continued. Steve Parker found the colony's emergency lighting system and turned it on. Bright white lights filled the building, and the Skarn covered their eyes and made angry noises. Their vision was adapted for darkness, and the sudden light hurt them. "They don't like bright lights," Steve called out. "I can keep switching them on and off to confuse them." Amy noticed that the Skarn moved in patterns like a pack of wolves. They had a leader who made clicking sounds to coordinate attacks. If they could disrupt the communication, the pack would become less organized. Jenny Martinez, get to the shuttle, Jake ordered. Fire up the engines and be ready for emergency takeoff. Carl Davis, help her get there safely. Jenny was their pilot, and Carl was the ship's medic. They ran toward the exit while Mike and the others provided covering fire. Two Skarn tried to block their path, but Carl threw a medical scanner at one creature's head while Jenny kicked the other one in what she hoped was a sensitive area. The kick worked, and the Skarn doubled over in pain. Jenny and Carl made it outside and ran toward their shuttle, while more Skarn came out of hiding to chase them. Back inside the building, the remaining humans were learning more about their enemies with each passing minute. The Skarn were fast and strong, but they attacked in predictable ways. They relied on fear and overwhelming force instead of adapting their tactics. Mike Torres had been a sergeant in Earth's military where he learned that every enemy had weaknesses. The key was staying alive long enough to find them. He started. Giving orders like this was just another combat mission. Katie, take 2 people and block the east entrance with furniture. Steve, keep playing with those lights. Amy, I need you to find patterns in how they attack. The humans began working as a team in ways the Skarn had never seen before. Other species fought as individuals trying to save themselves. But humans naturally formed groups and shared resources, even when facing certain death. Lisa Ward used her medical knowledge to help treat wounded team members. She also noticed that Skarn blood was acidic and ate through metal slowly. Don't let their blood touch your skin, she warned. It will burn you. Pete Jackson knew the colony's layout better than anyone. He led the group through maintenance tunnels and storage areas that the Skarn had not explored yet. The narrow spaces were too small for the large creatures to follow easily. Amy Collins made the most important discovery while studying her scanner readings. The Skarn communicated using chemical signals that humans could not smell. But the colony's air filtration system was picking up these signals and analyzing them. I can track their communication patterns, Amy told Jake excitedly. If I can figure out their chemical language, I might be able to predict their attacks or even confuse their signals. Outside the building, Jenny Martinez had reached the shuttle and was starting the engines. The shuttle's sensors showed Skarn moving all around the colony in organized groups. But she also noticed something interesting about their movement patterns. The Skarn always left escape routes open because every other species they hunted tried to run away. They expected prey to flee so they could chase and kill them easily. But the humans in the building were not trying to escape. They were staying and fighting back. Carl Davis was setting up a medical station in the shuttle when he saw something. That made him think. A group of Skarn was watching the building but not attacking. They seemed confused by what was happening inside. Jenny, Carl said, looking through the shuttle's window. I don't think they understand what we're doing. They're just standing there like they don't know what to do next. Jenny looked at the scanner readings and realized Carl was right. The Skarn were used to quick hunts that ended with their prey, either dead or running away. But this hunt was lasting too long and the prey was fighting back effectively. Inside the building, the humans had killed 6 Skarn and wounded several others. More importantly, they had learned valuable information about their enemies. The creatures were strong and fast, but they were not very smart. They relied on instinct and pack behavior instead of creative thinking. Mike Torres was starting to feel optimistic for the first time since the fight began. These things might be tough, but they're not soldiers, he told Jake. They don't adapt their tactics and they don't learn from mistakes. Steve Parker had been experimenting with the colony's communication equipment. Most of it was broken, but some systems still worked. He managed to send a signal to the Discovery telling them about the situation. Captain Morrison, this is the Discovery, came a voice through the static. We received your signal. Do you need immediate extraction? Jake looked around at his team. They were tired, and some were wounded, but they were still fighting. More importantly, they were winning against creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations. Not yet Discovery, Jake replied. We're learning things about the Skarn that the galaxy needs to know. These monsters can be beaten. The Skarn pack leader outside the building was making angry clicking sounds. His warriors were supposed to have finished this hunt quickly like all the others. But these strange new prey creatures were proving more difficult than expected. 4. The first time in Skarn history, a hunt was not going according to plan. The pack leader did not understand why these creatures were not afraid. He did not know that fear was something humans used as fuel for fighting instead of a reason to give up. The battle was just beginning, but already the humans had done something no other species had managed. They had made the galaxy's apex predators, uncertain about their own abilities, and uncertainty was the first step toward defeat. 3 hours had passed since the fighting began, and the humans were no longer just defending themselves. They were learning and adapting faster than their enemies could understand. Amy Collins had figured out how to read the chemical signals. The Skarn used to communicate and was predicting their next moves. They're splitting into 3 groups, Amy told Mike Torres while watching her scanner. One group will attack from the north entrance while the other 2 try to come through the maintenance tunnels. Mike nodded and started positioning his people accordingly. Katie Brooks and Steve Parker would handle the north entrance while he took Jenny Martinez and Carl Davis to block the tunnel entrances. The humans were no longer reacting to Skarn attacks. They were getting ready for them. Lisa Ward had turned the colony's medical bay into a treatment center for wounded humans and a laboratory for studying Skarn biology. She had collected samples of the creature's blood and was learning important things about their chemistry. Their blood is acidic, but it breaks down quickly when exposed to oxygen, Lisa explained to Jake Morrison. If we can get their blood on them, they'll hurt themselves. Jake was impressed by how quickly his team was adapting to fight an enemy they had never seen before. This was what made humans different from other species. They did not just survive difficult situations. They learned from them and became stronger. Pete Jackson knew every machine and tool in the colony. He was helping Katie Brooks turn mining equipment into weapons. They had modified a drilling laser to fire rapid bursts and connected it to the colony's power grid for unlimited energy. This should punch through their scales easily, Katie said, testing the modified laser. And we have enough power to keep firing for hours. The Skarn attacked exactly when Amy predicted they would. But this time, the humans were ready and waiting. When the creatures came through the north entrance, they ran straight into Steve Parker's light traps and Katie's modified drilling laser. The bright strobing lights confused the Skarn and made them stumble into each other. Katie fired the laser in controlled bursts, hitting weak spots that Mike had identified earlier. 3 Skarn fell before the others realized they had walked into a prepared ambush. In the maintenance tunnels, Mike Torres was using human military tactics that no Skarn had ever encountered. He had set up crossfire positions and escape routes planned in advance. When the creatures entered the tunnels, they found themselves trapped in a killing zone. Carl Davis threw containers of medical acid that Lisa had prepared from Skarn blood, samples. The acid burned through the creatures' scales and made them retreat in pain. Jenny Martinez used her pilot training to coordinate the team's movements like they were flying in formation, but the most important change was happening in the Skarn pack leader's mind. Krexthor had led successful hunts across 4 star systems and had never lost a single warrior to prey species. Now he had lost 12 warriors, and the strange creatures were becoming more dangerous instead of weaker. Other species became tired and desperate as fights continued. But these humans seemed to gain energy from combat and learn new tactics constantly. They were not acting like prey animals. They were acting like competing predators. Amy Collins made another breakthrough while studying the Skarn communication patterns. I can send false chemical signals, she told Jake excitedly. I can make them think their pack leader is giving different orders. She had connected her scanner to the colony's air circulation system and was learning to create the chemical signals the Skarn used for coordination. It was like learning to speak their language but using smell instead of sound. Amy sent a false signal telling half the Skarn pack to retreat to the colony's outer buildings. The warriors were confused, but followed what they thought were orders from Krexthor. This split the pack and made them easier to fight. Steve Parker had been working on another project while maintaining the light systems. He had figured out how to turn the colony's communication array into a weapon that could damage Skarn hearing. Their ears are sensitive to high-frequency sounds, Steve explained while adjusting the equipment. I can create sounds that will hurt them and disrupt their coordination. When Steve activated his sonic weapon, the Skarn outside the building covered their ears and made pained noises. Some of them fell down and could not get back up. The pack's organization started falling apart as individual warriors could not hear orders or coordinate attacks. Katie Brooks had been studying the colony's industrial equipment and found something even more useful than weapons. The mining operation used controlled explosions to break apart rock formations. There were still explosives stored in the secure areas. We can collapse some of the tunnel systems, Katie told Mike. Trap groups of them underground where they can't coordinate with the main pack. Mike liked the idea of dividing their enemies into smaller groups. Humans were good at adapting tactics quickly, but the Skarn seemed to rely on pack coordination. Separate them, and they became much less dangerous. Jenny Martinez made trips between the building and the shuttle to transport explosives and equipment. She was also updating the Discovery about what they had learned. The information would be valuable for other human colonies that might face Skarn attacks. "Discovery, this is Martinez," she radioed from the shuttle. "We have confirmed that Skarn can be defeated using coordinated tactics and adapted technology. They rely on fear and overwhelming force but cannot adapt to changing battlefield conditions." The response from the Discovery was full of surprise. "Martinez, are you saying a 12-person team is successfully fighting 200 Skarn warriors?" "Affirmative, Discovery," Jenny replied while loading more supplies. "We have killed or wounded over 20 of them and divided their pack into confused groups. Captain Morrison believes we can eliminate the entire force." This news was shocking because no species in galactic history had ever defeated a Skarn pack in direct combat. Most civilizations tried to avoid them or pay tribute, to make them go away. The idea that humans could actually hunt the hunters was revolutionary. Lisa Ward had made another important discovery about Skarn biology. They have excellent night vision and sense of smell, but their hearing is limited to low-frequency sounds, she reported. They also seem to have poor memory. They don't learn from mistakes the way humans do. This explained why the Skarn kept falling for the same types of traps and ambushes. They relied on instinct and immediate pack coordination instead of learning and adaptation. Each attack was like the first attack because they could not process new information effectively. Carl Davis was treating wounded team members, but also noticed something interesting about human psychology during combat. "Nobody seems scared anymore," he told Jake. After the first hour, people stopped being afraid and started getting angry. Jake had noticed this, too. Fear was supposed to make prey animals weak and easy to catch, but fear made humans focused and determined to fight back. The emotion that was supposed to help the Skarn was actually helping their prey resist. Amy Collins sent another false chemical signal that told the remaining Skarn to gather in the colony's main storage building. When they followed the fake orders, they walked into Katie's biggest trap yet. She had rigged the building's support beams with explosives. When the explosives went off, the entire building collapsed on top of 30 Skarn warriors. The pack's numbers were now reduced to less than half, and their organization was completely broken. Krexthor realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had expected this hunt to be quick and easy like all the others. Instead, his pack was being systematically destroyed by creatures that seemed to enjoy fighting dangerous enemies. For the first time in Skarn history, a pack leader was considering retreat. But that would mean admitting that these strange new creatures were better hunters than the galaxy's apex predators. The thought was so disturbing that Krexthor could not accept it. There had to be another explanation for what was happening. These creatures could not possibly be superior to the Skarn. But deep in his mind, a new emotion was growing. An emotion that no Skarn had ever felt before when facing prey species. He was starting to feel afraid. The fourth day of the siege began with something that had never happened in Skarn history. 3 human warriors were hunting individual Skarn through the colony's tunnel systems. Mike Torres, Jenny Martinez, and Carl Davis moved through the darkness, like ghosts, tracking their prey with equipment and tactics the creatures could not understand. Amy Collins had taught them to mask their human scent using chemicals from the colony's laboratory. Steve Parker had given them modified scanners that could track Skarn heat signatures through walls. Most importantly, they had learned to think like predators instead of prey. The first Skarn warrior died without making a sound. Mike Torres had positioned himself above a tunnel entrance and dropped down when the creature passed underneath. His knife found the weak spot between neck scales that no other species had lived long enough to discover. Jenny Martinez used her pilot training to move silently through maintenance shafts. She found a Skarn guarding one of the tunnel intersections and killed it with a modified mining tool that Carl Davis had sharpened into a spear. The creature never knew she was there. Carl Davis approached his target differently. He used medical knowledge to identify pressure points in Skarn anatomy and disabled his prey with precise strikes. The warrior was paralyzed but alive when Carl dragged it back to the main building for Amy to study. The captured Skarn was terrified in a way that confused Amy Collins. She had expected the creature to be angry or defiant like a trapped predator should be. Instead, it was acting like prey animals did when caught by something higher on the food chain. "It keeps making submission sounds," Amy told Jake Morrison while studying the creature. "I think it's trying to surrender, but Skarn don't have a concept for surrender. They've never needed one before." Jake looked at the captured warrior and saw something that made him understand what was happening. The Skarn's eyes were not showing anger or hatred. They were showing fear and confusion. The galaxy's apex predators were learning what it felt like to be hunted. Katie Brooks had been working on the colony's industrial systems and made a discovery that changed everything. The Skarn had built their breeding chamber in the old storage facility, but they had not understood what the building was designed for. "It's a chemical processing plant," Katie explained to the team. "They built their nest inside a facility designed to handle dangerous industrial chemicals. If I can restart the systems, I can fill the entire area with compounds that will be toxic to them." Lisa Ward helped Katie identify which chemicals would be most effective against Skarn biology. They found compounds that would dissolve the creatures, scales and others that would damage their respiratory systems. The breeding chamber would become a death trap. Pete Jackson knew the facility's control systems and helped them prepare the chemical attack. The Skarn put about 50 warriors in there to guard their breeding chamber, he said while checking the building's layout. "If we can get them all at once, it will break their will to fight." Steve Parker had been monitoring Skarn communications and noticed something important. The pack was no longer following normal hunting patterns. They were staying in defensive positions and avoiding areas where humans might be hiding. "They're not hunting anymore," Steve reported to Jake. "They're trying to protect their breeding chamber and avoid further losses. The hunters have become the hunted." Amy Collins used this information to plan the final phase of their counterattack. She sent false chemical signals that would make the Skarn think human forces were approaching from multiple directions. This would force them to divide their remaining warriors and make them easier to eliminate. The plan worked perfectly. Confused by false signals and afraid of human ambushes, the Skarn split into small groups that could not support each other. Each group was now vulnerable to the same hunting tactics that Mike's team had been using. Jenny Martinez coordinated the attacks from her shuttle using the communications equipment to direct human forces like a military operation. Carl Davis and the others moved through the colony, systematically eliminating isolated Skarn groups. But the most important battle was happening in Krexthor's mind. The pack leader had never experienced failure and could not understand what was happening to his warriors. Every Skarn instinct told him that prey species should be weak and frightened. These humans were neither. Krexthor made a decision that shocked his remaining warriors. He sent a communications signal to the humans, requesting single combat with their leader. It was a desperate attempt to salvage Skarn honor and prove that his species was still superior. Jake Morrison received the challenge through Amy's translation equipment. The message was simple. The Skarn leader wanted to fight him alone. If Jake won, the remaining Skarn would leave the planet. If Krexthor won, the humans would be allowed to evacuate safely. "It's obviously a trap," Mike Torres said when Jake explained the challenge. "They don't honor agreements with prey species. They'll kill you and then kill the rest of us." But Amy Collins had been studying Skarn culture through their communication, patterns, and behavioral observations. "I don't think it's a trap," she said carefully. "Their social structure is based on pack hierarchy and personal dominance. If their leader loses in single combat, the pack will accept defeat." Jake made his decision quickly. The humans had already proven they could defeat the Skarn through teamwork and tactics. Now they had a chance to prove something even more important. They could show that individual humans were superior to individual Skarn, even in direct physical combat. "I'll fight their leader," Jake announced to his team. "But I'm not going to fight fair. Fair fights are for creatures that rely on natural weapons. Humans use tools and intelligence." Lisa Ward and Katie Brooks helped Jake prepare for the duel. They gave him lightweight armor made from colony materials and weapons designed specifically for fighting large reptilian predators. Carl Davis treated his existing injuries and gave him stimulants to enhance his reflexes. Most importantly, Amy Collins briefed him on everything they had learned about Skarn anatomy and behavior. She identified weak points, blind spots, and behavioral patterns that Jake could exploit during the fight. The duel took place in the colony's main courtyard, with both species watching from safe distances. Krexthor was an impressive sight standing, 9 feet tall with battle scars covering his dark scales. His claws were longer than any they had seen, and his yellow eyes glowed with predatory confidence. Jake Morrison looked small in comparison. He was barely 6 feet tall and weighed less than half what the Skarn leader weighed. But he carried human technology and human intelligence along with thousands of years of human military knowledge. Krexthor attacked, first expecting to end the fight quickly with overwhelming force. His claws aimed for Jake's throat in a move that had killed pack leaders of his own species. But Jake was not there when the claws arrived. He had studied the attack pattern and moved accordingly. Jake's first counterattack targeted the tendons behind Krexthor's knee with a modified mining tool. The Skarn stumbled as his leg was damaged, and Jake rolled away before the creature could grab him. First blood went to the human. The fight continued for several minutes, with Jake using mobility and precision against Krexthor's size and strength. Every attack Jake made was calculated to cause maximum damage to specific weak points. Every defense was designed to avoid the Skarn's natural weapons. Krexthor became increasingly frustrated as his instinctive fighting style proved ineffective against human tactics. He was stronger and faster, but Jake was smarter and better prepared. The human was fighting like a predator while the Skarn was fighting like an animal. The end came when Jake used Krexthor's own aggression against him. The Skarn leader made a powerful overhead strike that Jake deflected into the ground. While Krexthor's claws were stuck in the metal flooring, Jake struck at the creature's exposed neck with surgical precision. Krexthor fell and did not get up. The galaxy's most feared predator had been defeated by a human using nothing but intelligence, preparation, and the willingness to fight dirty when survival was at stake. The remaining Skarn warriors watched their leader die and felt something their species had never experienced before. They were looking at creatures that were better hunters than they were. The prey had become the predators, and the natural order of the galaxy had changed forever. The silence after Krexthor's death was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. For the first time in recorded history, a Skarn pack leader had fallen in single combat to a prey species. The remaining 60 Skarn warriors stood motionless, staring at their dead leader and the small human who had killed him. Jake Morrison wiped green blood from his modified mining tool and looked up at the surviving Skarn. He was breathing hard and had several cuts on his arms, but he was alive while their greatest warrior was dead. The message was clear to every creature watching. Amy Collins monitored the chemical signals coming from the Skarn pack and translated their communications for the human team. "They're broadcasting submission signals," she said with amazement in her voice. "The entire pack is acknowledging defeat." The lead Skarn warrior after Krexthor was a female named Vectra. She approached Jake slowly with her claws retracted and her head lowered in a posture that Amy recognized as surrender. No Skarn had ever surrendered to another species before this moment. Vectra spoke in the clicking language that Steve Parker's equipment could now translate into English. "The humans have proven superior in combat," the translation said. "We acknowledge your dominance and will withdraw from this territory." Mike Torres kept his weapon ready, but Jake waved him back. This was a historic moment that needed to be handled carefully. The humans had not just won a battle. They had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. "Take your pack and leave this system," Jake told Vectra through the translation equipment. "Tell other Skarn that humans are not prey animals. We are hunters just like you. Maybe better hunters." Vectra made a sound that Amy's equipment translated as agreement mixed with fear. The Skarn began gathering their dead and wounded while the humans watched. There was no victory celebration among the creatures. They moved like a defeated army retreating from a battlefield. Katie Brooks and Pete Jackson were already working to restore the colony's communication systems. They needed to send word to Earth Command about what had happened here. The information would change how humanity dealt with alien threats. "Earth Command. This is the UES Discovery," came the message through the repaired equipment. "Please prepare for a priority report on first contact protocols and alien threat assessment." Captain Jake Morrison took the communication device and began his report. "Command, we have successfully defended the Kepler 442b colony against a Skarn pack of approximately 200 warriors. The enemy has been defeated with minimal human casualties." The response from Earth Command was immediate disbelief. "Discovery, please repeat your last message. Did you say you defeated a Skarn pack?" "Confirmed, Command," Jake replied. "The Skarn are not invincible. They can be defeated using human tactics technology and psychological warfare. We have documented everything for military analysis." Amy Collins was compiling her research data for transmission to Earth's xenobiology departments. The information about Skarn biology behavior and communication methods would be invaluable for future encounters with the species. "The Skarn rely entirely on instinct and pack coordination," Amy explained in her report. "They do not adapt tactics during combat and cannot learn from failure. Human flexibility and tool use provide significant advantages against their fighting style." Lisa Ward added medical information about treating Skarn injuries and defending against their natural weapons. "Their acid blood and toxic saliva can be countered with basic medical supplies," she reported. "Human physiology is more resistant to their biological weapons than other known species." Steve Parker documented the communication and technology advantages humans had developed during the siege. "Standard Earth colony equipment can be modified into effective anti-Skarn weapons," he explained. "Their reliance on chemical communication makes them vulnerable to signal interference and false information." Jenny Martinez piloted the shuttle between the colony and the Discovery while evacuation preparations began. The 3 surviving colonists would need medical treatment and psychological counseling after their ordeal. But they were alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. Carl Davis was treating the human team's injuries and marveling at how well everyone had performed under extreme stress. 12 people just defeated the galaxy's apex predators," he said while bandaging Jake's wounds. "Wait until the other species hear about this." The news spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Species that had lived in terror of the Skarn for generations learned that the monsters could be beaten. The psychological impact was enormous across dozens of civilizations. On the Skarn homeworld, the surviving pack members delivered news that shattered their society's understanding of the universe. The great hunters had been outgunned, outcollared, and outthought by a species they had never heard of before. Skarn military leaders gathered to analyze the defeat and understand what had gone wrong. The survivors' reports painted a disturbing picture of prey that fought like predators and used incomprehensible tactics that made their natural advantages useless. "These humans do not behave like any species we have encountered," reported Vectra to the Skarn High Council. "They adapt, constantly learn from combat, and coordinate their actions with impossible precision. They turned our own strengths against us." The High Council made a decision that would have been unthinkable before the Kepler 442b incident. Skarn expansion into human territory was forbidden until further intelligence could be gathered. The galaxy's apex predators were afraid of a species they had never fought before. Back on Earth, the military implications of the discovery were being analyzed by the highest levels of government. Humanity had accidentally proven itself capable of defeating enemies that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The strategic possibilities were enormous. Pete Jackson was debriefed extensively about the colony's defenses and industrial capabilities. His knowledge would help design better protection for future human settlements in dangerous regions of space. "The Skarn expected us to be helpless," Pete explained to Earth Command analysts. "They didn't prepare for resistance and couldn't adapt when their standard tactics failed. Any human colony with basic defensive preparations could probably fight them off." Ryan Clark provided information about Skarn behavior and breeding habits that would help predict their movements and target their operations. "They establish breeding chambers quickly but abandon them if threatened," he reported. "Attacking their reproduction sites causes panic and disorganization. The rescued colonists became heroes throughout human space. Their survival against impossible odds inspired other settlements and gave humanity confidence in dealing with alien threats." The galaxy's perception of humans changed overnight. Amy Collins published her research on Skarn biology and psychology in scientific journals across dozens of species. The information helped other civilizations understand that the creatures that had seemed invincible were actually quite limited in their capabilities. "The Skarn are excellent predators, but poor soldiers," Amy wrote in her conclusion. "They rely on fear and overwhelming force instead of tactical flexibility. Any species willing to fight back systematically can defeat them." Captain Jake Morrison was promoted and given command of a new Earth defense initiative focused on protecting human colonies from alien threats. His experience at Kepler 442b became required study for all military personnel. The galaxy thought. "The Skarn were unstoppable because nobody had ever really fought back," Jake explained to new recruits. "We proved that monsters are only scary until you figure out how to kill them." The Kepler 442b incident marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Humanity went from being an unknown species to being recognized as one of the galaxy's most dangerous civilizations. Other species that had bullied weaker neighbors began reconsidering their policies. The Skarn never attacked human territory again. Word spread through their pack networks that humans were to be avoided at all costs. The great hunters had learned that in a galaxy full of monsters, some prey was too dangerous to hunt. Years later, when other species asked humans how they had defeated the legendary Skarn, the answer was always simple. They had refused to be victims and had fought back with everything they had. In the end, that was all it took to prove that even among monsters, humans were the ones to fear.